So, welcome to the second part of the What's Current podcast. Again, joined by Sam from Oval Renewables, where we're just going to talk a little bit more about some of this renewables journey and what it means for you as installers or thinking of getting into it. So, Sam, you mentioned earlier about the feed-in tariff, but obviously that's been gone quite a while now. But we've got this smart export guarantee as an alternative. Yeah. And like we've just said about the generation meter, probably no longer needed. So that wouldn't be used for that, would it? So is the SEG something that you've seen take off? Are customers having that?
Yeah, so the Smart Export Guarantee was kind of something that they brought in when the feed-in tariff disappeared, because historically the feed-in tariff worked in two ways. You got a payment for just generating your power, so no matter if you used it or you sent it back or whatever, you got paid that 40p, 43p in the height of the feed-in tariff. And then they said, at that point, smart meters weren't really a thing, and they said, right, 50% of whatever you generate, we reckon you will send back to the grid. So there was an export payment added to your feed-in tariff, which was around 4p. And when the feed-in tariff disappeared, there was kind of uproar because the export payment also disappeared. So anyone that was getting solar that wasn't using it all was effectively sending it back to the grid for then the grid to charge them. You send it back to the grid for free, and then effectively having to buy it back later on in the evening when they got home, but they'd given them the power. So there was a bit of time where some people weren't getting anything for the power that they sent back to the grid. And then over time, they kind of cottoned on to that and gone, well, actually, yeah, we need to give you something back. So they just matched what they paid during the feed-in tariff, which was 4p.
Okay.
But that's now meant that companies like Octopus have been quite innovative around the export side of things and the grid demand side response and supporting the grid and all this other sort of stuff. And actually, we've just fitted a battery at our house. Been too busy fitting it for everybody else to fit one at ours. And so I was actually looking at it last night with the wife, and there's a tariff out there with Octopus where the feed-in tariff is around 15p. We just get a flat tariff of 15p. So we've had a customer where their intention, or a few customers now, where their intention was to get a battery and solar PV system to basically reduce their import. So they maybe had 7,000 kilowatt hours that they were using in their home, big house, electric heating, maybe electric car. And so they wanted a solar PV system so that they could generate the power, store it, and then give it to the house later on.
Yeah, so self-consumption.
Yeah,
reduce,
self-consumption, which is basic and is kind of the heart of most systems. What we're seeing a lot now is actually customers going onto these sort of tariffs and going, well, hang on, I can buy the power at 7.5p. I'm on a 24-hour export payment, so no matter when I export power, of 15p. Why don't I let the solar generate and feed back to the grid, charge my battery up to 100% overnight on 7.5p, so effectively just self-consume on 7.5p, and then just reap the rewards of exporting at 15p, so effectively making 7.5p per kilowatt hour you export. So I had a good conversation with a customer that was just finished in Northampton, where he said my entire reason for getting this system has changed overnight when I realised some of he's on the agile tag because he really wants to do it day to day and sort of play the energy market. And that for me, we learn a lot through customers because we can't research everything. And that for me made me think, wow, the whole reason for people getting systems has changed. Yes, they want to reduce their energy bills, which they can do through playing the energy market, but they have to have this sort of system to do it. And so my view is that I think battery storage only systems will increase massively. Yeah,
I was going to ask you about that. Are you seeing more of that? Not so much reliant on the solar as well. Obviously, they work better together.
Yeah.
But like you say, with those almost like those old school Economy 7 agile broker tariffs, there is some legs in having just a battery on its own, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely legs in it, and we've done one system which we did a YouTube video on, but that was before VAT was removed from batteries as well.
Of course.
So now you had to really have solar to unlock the 0% VAT, but that's gone now. So you don't have to get solar to have that. So that opens it up to places like flats, to maybe heritage buildings that can't have it on the roof, don't want to have ground mount system, can't get planning for it. The roof is maybe knackered and so needs to be replaced, and they don't want to go to all that expense yet. So actually, I think battery storage systems are very, very important and are going to be a big part of it. And one thing I want to say on the battery storage systems is that our grid is moving more and more towards wind, solar, maybe a bit of hydro, but certainly wind and solar, which are slightly unpredictable. And what I think is what I think that'll lead to is a grid and a pricing structure that is very flexible, where you'll have really high prices during still and dull days, and very low prices during windy and sunny days. And the only way that you can be a part of what I think is the future energy network and future energy pricing is to have something like a battery, because you need to be able to take advantage of those energy prices when they are available. Of
course, yeah.
And unless
storage
you're
is the only
home,
way, really, isn't it?
Yeah, unless you're rushing home and putting the casserole in in the middle of the day when you're in maybe negative power, when the grid is paying you to take power because there's so much wind and solar. You need something that you can just go onto your phone, or maybe even directly links into things like Agile, and just sets an auto scheduling to actually just charge up from this 2p power. It might be 42p at 5-6 o'clock when everyone's
come home from work,
when the sun's maybe gone in, it's maybe got still. So for me, anyone that's not getting battery storage as a business or as a consumer, like a home, like a domestic consumer, will actually be paying for a lot of the other customers that do have the battery storage through just paying a flat rate of 30p. Because I think that means that the opportunity for batteries is actually probably greater than the opportunity for solar, because you can fit a battery switch in anyone's house.
It's like with mine. Mine's grade 2 listed, and it's the frontage and the roof that's the listed part, although the whole house is classed as listed once it is, which is a bit annoying. So for me, solar would probably be a no if I applied for that. But actually, like you say, putting a battery system somewhere within the property probably would be a good alternative for me, and then take advantage of one of those systems. So you think about your uses for battery storage systems. You're quite right. Is it? Oh, we're all sick of high bills, and that we want to use more of the system we've installed, the renewable energy, rather than reliance on the grid. And then perhaps what would you say then is you're seeing with your customers? Are they more aware of this broker kind of tariff systems for that sort of arbitrage kind of thing? And then also, obviously, we've got the backup system, haven't we? So, we are probably seeing, and you might see this more than me because I'm not installing them, across the choices we've got. All right, we have got the other option to back up networks on bigger systems, I would have thought, if you're doing more commercial industrial. But I suppose the backup power might almost come last now. I don't know. What are you seeing?
I think
it depends on the customer, I suppose.
It does depend on the customer. It depends on the size of the property, because obviously the bigger the property, they'll probably have more that they want to back up, or they'll have to invest more to save more, if you know what I mean. So I think there's a real opportunity for places like flats and certainly low-income homes where there may be historically kind of a smaller property with a smaller energy usage, which means a smaller battery, which means a smaller investment. So I think there's a good opportunity there. But I think the whole visibility of these flexible tariffs is very hidden at the minute, mainly because none of the big players are really offering it. It's only Octopus that are offering it, and it baffles me.
Surprising that is, isn't it?
It absolutely baffles me that some of these big players, like British Gas and Eon Next, I think it is now, and some of these other big players, they're not trying to compete with a flexible tariff system like Octopus. But for me, with where the grid is going, I know we've got nuclear on the cards and all this other stuff, which is big, large investments. They're not trying to compete with Octopus on any of it. And that obviously means that there's less competition in those markets. So if you've got solar and battery storage, or solar only or battery only, you kind of just go with Octopus because they're the best ones. They've kind of got their niche, but they haven't got a patent on it. Any of these other companies could start offering it.
And it would get more competitive and better, wouldn't it? If more people entered the market, obviously you're going to end up buying it cheaper because they want to compete, and you get more when you give it back as well.
Drives innovation, drives all of that, and so for me, it's strange that's not happening. Not to say it won't happen, and that I really would welcome that. But also, Octopus have kind of, they've been around a little while now, but there's not many people that, we're in the industry, we kind of know of them. But if you speak to Joe Bloggs, who's just working all the hours they can to, in whatever job, they're just on a rolling contract with British Gas or whoever else. They don't even know who Octopus is, and so they've got no chance of knowing that they could do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So I think if more of the big players went into the market looking to offer these sort of flexible tariffs, it would increase the visibility and start that conversation in more households to go, have you seen that British Gas are offering this overnight? So we could look at it. Kind of increases the chances that they then stumble upon making a 5-6 grand investment, which I know is a lot for some people, is not a lot for others, but is definitely scalable. Making that investment to make more use of these flexible tariffs. So, I think we're right at the start of that though, and so we definitely not missed the boat on it. And I think it's a really exciting place to be as electricians to almost have like a bit of it is kind of an energy transition for homes and businesses, because they've gone from what's the best rate we can get. We've got an overnight rate and we've got a day rate. Now it's a kind of like, well, what's the best rate we can get and how flexible is it? Because we've got this big 100 kilowatt battery, 100 kilowatt hour battery that's sat there. We can store 100 kilowatt hours, we can discharge it at 50 kilowatts, and so we can actually make a massive difference to this manufacturing business's pricing. But we just need more people offering that sort of pricing and tariff system to make it more mainstream, to basically increase the visibility of it.
The visibility, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think others will catch up, and you're quite right. We haven't missed the boat. It's still an early adopter, isn't it? Interesting what you're saying there about when you mentioned price, and systems. Obviously, because of the demand, the systems, the equipment, everything's relative. It will start to drop. So, and again, we're going to get more installers jump on the bandwagon. But what do you see, Sam, as your sort of main customer base? In my naive head, Steve's head, I'm thinking it's still fairly wealthy people that are having these systems, and then the idea behind it is some of the stuff we've talked about. I'm sick of the high energy. I remember there's one guy down where I live now in Devon. He owns his own farm, and he said, Steve, I want you to come and design me a system so I'm completely off grid. Yeah. I'm sick of these high energy people. I mean, his energy must be ridiculous what he's paying to, with his farm animals and all the rest of it. And he's got an on-site accommodation where the guests are leaving the lights on. So he's absolutely sick to the teeth. So he's very much, I want to reduce my energy. Yeah. But you must have people that are passionate about the green agenda. You must have all different reasons. But what do you see, or have you seen a shift in your customer base? Is it like the fairly wealthy people that can afford it, or are you seeing more people that just, like your family of 4, 2.4 children kind of vibe? What's your customer base? Varied, I presume.
Yeah, it is a bit varied, but I would say for us as a company, we specifically are not the cheapest, so we don't try and compete on price. We use really good quality equipment with long warranties. We offer really good service, and I'm not trying to do a sales pitch for Oval Renewables.
Yeah, but it's a good one if you are.
Well, I could look dead in the camera and do it. But so that means that our systems are usually, the sort of the highest quote that a customer might get. So if you've got 3, we're probably first or second on the side of the price. So that means that our customer base tends to be more the wealthier client that's got that money in locked away, or they've got a bigger house which has bigger energy bills and all of this. But I think whilst there's an opportunity for them that have the broadest shoulders to make that investment to reduce their bills, what I want to, when I speak to customers and say, I don't want you to reduce the amount of energy you use, because I want you to live comfortably, but I want to try and provide you a system that allows you to live comfortably without having to pay for that energy from the grid. Yeah. So whilst there's always good ways you can reduce your energy, turning lights off and that, but even now in the days of LED, it's next to nothing anyway. Yeah. But there's things you can do to reduce that 7,000 kilowatt hours maybe to 6,500 in a year. But equally, I want to, as long as the money is there and the investment and the drive is there, I want to give you that 7,000 or 6,500 from your solar or your battery, or through load shifting,
Yeah.
and effectively moving that load to buying it in overnight, storing it in the battery and giving it to you when you need it. I want to give you that amount of power so you can live comfortably. It's not an impact on your life, but all you see is that direct debit to Octopus or British Gas or whoever has been massively reduced.
So that's the main driver of a system you design. And that's interesting coming onto that as well, because I think one of the things I always stress is that customer engagement and that survey risk assessment conversation has got to be one of the most important things. You're understanding what the customer's needs are. So you go back then to the office and say, right, let's design this system that fits the bill. Because we're going to see too many, aren't we, Sam, if we're honest, of people just thinking, oh, I'll go with that manufacturer. I'm always going to fit the same size battery. I'm always going to put the same size array on the roof without any thought or due diligence really for the customer. That's not on really, is it? Because that's been a bit of a charlatan.
I think that whole, the way that you've just mentioned that about having the same inverter, same size inverter, same number of panels, obviously the roof will determine that, but basically having the same number of panels, same end goal for every customer isn't achievable.
No.
It was the standard during the feed-in tariff, 16 250 watt panels with a 3.68 inverter. That was literally what would be sold, and the company I worked for sold because that was
almost like a package system.
It was a sweet spot for the feed-in tariff and for the DNO and everything else. But now that has gone, and it's not about how much you can earn from the solar, it's about what you can save. It's meant that the systems have to be designed a lot more thoughtfully as to what the customer needs. But you mentioned about not having, not just having one type of system. I think we, as a company, stick to only a couple of manufacturers so that we know them pretty much inside out. We've got a good rapport with them. So if we have any problems, we know who to speak to. We've got mobile numbers of people in technical if we can't quite get through.
On a Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. but we have that good relationship with them, and it means we can explain how the system's going to work to the customer as well, clearer, rather than just picking whatever Edmonton's has got on the shelf the next day. We're using a specific
planned
product.
properly.
But we've overspec'd a lot of solar PV systems. We maybe have a customer that needs 4,500 kilowatt hours a year of consumption, so therefore pretty much a generation coupled with a battery. But we've recommended, it's been a little bit of a stab in the dark, but we've recommended a bigger system than that because that customer, after speaking to them, is thinking about possibly having an air source heat pump, electric car, EV, but then also mentioning about the export side of things. So if we go back to what we just mentioned about the 15p side of things, yes, that customer might only use in their house 4,500 kilowatt hours a year, but if they're going to generate 8,000 from this big solar PV system, that just means they're getting that 15p export more common and increasing the amount that they're getting paid. So as long as we can achieve that through the DNO application process with a bigger inverter, yes, it's oversized for their consumption, but I think
you've future-proofed it, haven't you, really?
We've future-proofed it, but we've also given them another revenue stream where we go, yes, that system will supply a house with power, but it will also generate you an income by exporting power to the grid and earning that 15p. Yes, at 4p it's fairly low, but now that people at Octopus are bringing in a higher export rate, the ability to earn a decent amount of money per year from just exporting has increased. So those people that have invested an extra couple of grand in getting another 5 or 6 panels. 5 or 6 panels nowadays is a couple of kilowatts.
Exactly, because of the output.
They are getting more from the revenue from exporting. So
makes sense.
It's a bit of a shift in the kind of mentality of how these systems are sold. It's not just about covering the home's consumption and reducing the bills. It's also about earning a bit of an income from it as well.
Income, and like you say, in future, you might have one EV, but what if their partner or someone else in the household ends up with another EV? Suddenly you've got potential 64 amps, haven't you, just going out? So
exactly, even having extension to the building, and having maybe an electric underfloor heating system or whatever. All these things are in the pipeline, and these systems that we design and that most people design are designed with sort of 25-year warranties on the panels with, 10 to 25-year warranties on inverters. Batteries at 10 years. None of this stuff is like 2 years.
No.
So you've got to think a bit longer term with these things as well. And that's difficult to sell sometimes when a customer has only got 10 grand to spend and you're trying to give them a system that's 15 grand and they've maybe had other quotes for, 10, 11 grand and you're trying to... But I find that having an honest conversation with people about it and giving them the cold hard facts and actually... You're not just sending them a package deal that they've seen, buy now to secure your 10%. Actually just being a human being about it and going, look, this is why we've done it. This is what we think is going to come into the industry, which is now being proved right through Octopus, increasing the export rate and things. That can very quickly turn the customer from wanting a 10 grand system to a 20, 30 grand system. And we've had that where people have come to us. We often ask a budget. If they've got a budget in mind, and many people say no, but they do. They just want to tell us.
Of course, they've got a figure. We've all got a figure in our head.
The ones that do maybe say 20 grand, and by the end of it, they're spending 30 grand because we've gone through the whole, idea around the export side of things, the battery backup, which battery backup has no impact on the payback time. That's just another feature.
It might be a home worker needs the Wi-Fi on and a few lights, so the backup could be important.
And they kind of think, well, if I'm going to get a battery and I'm going to spend X amount anyway, I might as well spend a little bit more and give it another purpose. So, I
love that, the fact that you do, because to me that's just brilliant to hear, because we've got to have that customer conversation. And like I say, we drum it into anyone that's thinking of getting into it. Like you say, as soon as you see those package deals of like, we fit this and it's a fixed price, I just think that can't happen in today. Like you say, our consumption and how we use power in even our homes, in our businesses, it's changed dramatically from a 2 up, 2 down with, a couple of sockets here and there and the cooker and the immersion heater. We're in a whole new, different world. We're feeding back in and all the rest of it.
That's the whole prosumer thing, isn't it? It's a two-way street.
Fascinating.
Now.
How do you deal with that? Actually, that you mentioned there about the DNO application. How do you find that with the G98, G99, and do you ever touch on the G100s for your systems?
They do. Okay. They do a lot of the time. What we're finding is that because we tend to go on bigger on the inverters, so our common domestic inverters tend to be really between 5 and 10 kilowatts. It's very rare that it's under 5. And what we find is that the DNOs come back fairly quickly for 5s. They tend to be fairly straightforward through the fast track application schemes.
Because they're fairly simple, aren't they?
And they're not much above this strange figure of 16 amps per phase that's kind of been created. But when you get to sort of the 8 and 10 kilowatt inverters on a single phase domestic supply, then we're looking at export limitation, which is fine. And I say to customers, don't worry about it. If they're saying that you can have this 8 kilowatt inverter, but you've got to limit the export to 4, so great. You can use all that 8 if if your batteries can charge using that 8. You can deliver it to your car. You can do everything that you want to self-consume it, but they can only have that amount going back to the grid, which is fine. I do try and push people to get as big an export limit as possible, even if it costs them a little bit, because of this whole 15p, buy this, send, export it back.
And you can see the direction of travel as well. So
you can see that's coming. And so to pay £1,000 to get it lifted from 4 kilowatt to 4 kilowatt export limit to an 8 kilowatt export limit, it might be more than that or less than that, depending on the network parameters in that area. To me, that's a worthwhile investment because you can then discharge your system quicker to the grid and earn more money. And agile tariffs, there's times where the export rate is much higher than 15p per kilowatt hour because the demand on the grid is so large that they want people to be distributing into their cul-de-sac or area because Mrs. Smith down the road's got the oven on or the kettle on or the electric shower on, whatever. So it actually helps the grid. So having that higher export rate is really handy.
It's a creaking grid, isn't it? That system's not fit for purpose anymore. And I know, we've been talking about the smart or super grid for a long time, but I think we're in a world of they're moving, the grid and that network system is moving as this is moving, isn't it? It's almost like you say, and again, one of the things we always try and educate on and anything we present is like, they've got to know about it, because if you know, you think of how many, you know, you say to EV installers how many, oh, you have to notify, and you're like, yeah. You know, and obviously with solar PV and battery, that's even more important. That, you know, when we know there's systems out there where there's the DNO aren't aware of that system being in place.
And I'm sure they factor some of that into the calculations, but yeah, I think notifying them about it is important. But equally, even though it is a creaking grid, even if we were to try and meet the demand of every project, I think you might know better than me, I might put you in a spot here, but I think the maximum demand of properties has tended to be around the 7 kilowatt mark, that when the DNO's been looking at, it might even be less than that, I can't remember historically. You suddenly have a car sat on there charging at 7 kilowatts for, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours, suddenly, and you've got, you know, a number of people on your street doing that, suddenly that becomes very, all those calculations go out the window, and then you have a battery that's also taking advantage of that.
It is a traditional figure that's been come up with for many years. It's never gone away. It's a bit like the old diversity calculation that's been there forever, that doesn't really make any sense.
Where if you did it for if you stuck by it on everything, every house would be 200 amp maximum demand. Yeah. So I think you are right. I think that figure, those average figures that they say of the average household, it's sort of gone out the window now, because you've just said you're designing systems that are so bespoke because the customers are so wide and varied, whether that's domestic, commercial, or industrial. You know, we went on Monday. I drove to somewhere, and yesterday actually, when we were doing some more recording and meeting different customers. And, you know, I saw a whole bank of, you know, of car chargers, all different makes, which was quite nice to see, all different ones. And I thought, and there was at least 7 cars plugged into them. So you imagine if you were just a business owner and had your own little unit, and you decide to go down that route, you think of all the power that's been drawn. You know, suddenly your bill's going a lot higher for that business. Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, there's opportunities there for companies to self-generate, to self-store, and also provide that service for their employees with regards to charging electric vehicles, because the whole EV thing is a difficult puzzle for people, you know, people with off-street parking, and, you know, there's a whole podcast on its own with that, but you know, there's all these challenges, and a lot of the naysayers in all of this area kind of point to all these challenges, and you go, I'm not denying that there's problems with you know, infrastructure. It's getting better and they're putting money into it, but there's always going to be problems with infrastructure as things move on, as we build more homes and everything. But you know, when the car was invented, there was problems. Most probably, I mean, I wasn't around during that point, and you weren't either.
Well, I was close.
but if those problems weren't bared with and they weren't addressed and improved on, we'd still be bouncing around in horse and cart, you know.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and I'm sure there was people that...
Yeah, they didn't think about where to park them or anything, did they?
That's it. And so, you know, all these problems that we see with people saying about EVs and, you know, we're going to rely on hydrogen and all of that, great. If it comes online and it solves the problem, fantastic. But we've got to just try and improve and innovate on what we've got and not get hung up on just abandoning it because there's a problem with, you know, not the access to some EV chargers, or you go to some EV chargers and they're broken, and unfortunately that's just day-to-day life. There's problems, there's problems there, and I know that doesn't help if you sat there at a service station listening to this whilst you're waiting for a charger to become available. But you know, that is just something, unfortunately, that we have to bear with and just keep the momentum going to increase the infrastructure across the country. And I think batteries and solar have got a really good place in that area, because
I agree.
Because if there is a local charging station that can see through trends that they need a lot of power between, you know, 4 and 6 p.m, and there's properties in that area that have solar and batteries, there's the ability there through the whole smart grid side of things to actually go, well, we can provide an export price for those properties in that area of a higher rate if they can reduce their consumption and discharge some power back to the grid. And so I think actually the solution to a lot of these problems is actually just innovating on the pricing structure, because the pricing structure for tariffs, because that'll allow homeowners and business owners to see that as an opportunity to invest their own capital in solar and battery systems, because there is this pot of money that will save the grid and the infrastructure kind of industries money by actually tapping into private investment, because companies are investing in their own properties and their own batteries, to supply just to the grid and earn maybe £1 a kilowatt hour because it's
it's multifaceted, isn't it? It's like saving money, it's making money, it's supporting it. It's a whole thing that is really exciting in the world of renewables because it all links in, and like we've just mentioned a little bit, like you say, a whole new podcast on it. You've got that old battery home, EV to home, EV to everything. It's just it's only gonna go more innovative. Can't even say that word.
I've tried to avoid it.
I won't say that one again. But it's only going to get better. The technology is going to move on much more advanced, and like you say, in a few years' time, we'll be sat here doing another one, going, "Wow, that seems so dated." Do you remember when? Yeah, exactly. You only had a panel that was 410 watts. Now you just need one giant panel on your roof or something.
Just
that takes
1 kilowatt panel. But it's a very, very exciting place to be, and this is what. Going right back to that 16-year-old that saw this 180 watt panel. I'm not trying to say that I could see all that. I could see all this coming. I couldn't, and I wasn't. I was thinking more about what I was going to do at the weekend at that point.
Yeah.
But what really sparked me interest about solar and batteries.
Another pun there. Sparked me interest.
They just come naturally, don't they? I think they teach you that. That's the JTL thing. They teach you that. So I could see all that. I could see that it was a really exciting place to be, and it just felt like the momentum was in that area where you could just self-generate through the product you needed, aka sunlight, was pretty abundant, and it was free access. As long as you had a roof to capture it that was facing pretty much the right way, even though we had some really good success on some north-facing roofs, which was quite surprising. As long as you've got that and you've got some money in the bank to invest in it, or you're able to get finance, then you've got a really good opportunity there to reduce your energy bills and take that pressure off your family. And then suddenly, if there's another energy spike, instead of going from buying 7,000 kilowatt hours a year, and if you have a 10p spike in your energy cost, that is a huge amount of power that you're having. That is a huge amount of additional cost that you're having to spend. That's unexpected on that energy bill. Suddenly, if you're using 7,000, but you're only buying in 1,000. You get the same shock, but you're only having to buy 1,000 rather than 7,000. So it kind of insulates you from what the energy market does a little bit as well.
Which I think is the agenda, isn't it? To become more self-sufficient, not only individually but as a nation as well, which can only be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sam, this has been fascinating.
It's been good.
It's been absolutely brilliant. So we've covered loads of different stuff. So thanks for coming in today and agreeing to do it. We're going to do some more hopefully in the future. Maybe where I come and see you wherever you're doing some of your stuff. So look out for Sam's videos on YouTube, Instagram.
TikTok,
all the usual stuff.
All the sort of stuff.
Some brilliant stuff on there for the installs. So thanks for listening to another What's Current podcast. And listen on the next one.
Thank you.